Today, we're going to dig into a really powerful idea, one that might just change how you see arguments forever. It suggests that, from those huge scientific debates all the way down to small disagreements with friends, the real problem isn't what we're fighting about. It's actually something hidden much, much deeper, right inside the words we use. I mean, think about it. Have you ever been in an argument where it just feels like you're talking past each other? You're using the exact same words, but it's like you're speaking completely different languages. Why on earth does that happen so often? Well, the source we're exploring today makes a pretty bold claim. It argues the problem isn't really a difference of opinion, but a difference in our definitions. It's like we're building these entire elaborate arguments on a foundation made of sand. Let's see how that works. All right, Section 1, a hidden source of conflict. Here, we're going to explore how these improper definitions often become the real invisible engine behind our disputes. So here's the core idea in a nutshell. The source says that so much persistent conflict comes from a really simple failure. We don't properly define our terms. We just dive right in, building these huge arguments on concepts we can't even pin down. And that right there is where everything starts to fall apart. Okay, on to Section 2, the anatomy of a flaw. So what exactly makes a definition improper? Let's actually break down what that really means, because it's a crucial piece of the puzzle. The source has this fantastic term for it, semantic obfuscation. It's kind of a fancy way of saying we use complicated-sounding words to hide the fact that we don't really know what we're talking about. It's exactly like building a skyscraper on a foundation of sand. It might look impressive from a distance, but the whole thing is totally unstable. And this slide just shows the domino effect perfectly. The source uses math as a great example. Say you start with a kind of fuzzy definition of something as basic as a number. Then you build a concept on top of it, like infinity, which the source calls a symbolic fabrication. It's just a symbol, right? It doesn't have a solid meaning. Then you use that wobbly idea to define something else, and suddenly the whole system is incredibly fragile, just waiting to collapse. And that brings us to Section 3, the problem of intellectual greed. This is where we get to a really crucial question. Why do we do this? The source argues it's not always just an accident. Sometimes it's driven by something it calls intellectual greed, that tension between wanting to be right versus wanting to be honest. So what is intellectual greed? It's basically when our ego gets in the way of the truth. It's that all-too-human desire to protect our own authority by defending our terms, even when we have a nagging suspicion that they're flawed. At that point, the goal is no longer about discovering the truth. It's just about winning the argument. And this chart just lays out the two paths so clearly, it's kind of stark. On one side, you have the pursuit of truth. That requires us to admit our limits, and it leads to actual progress. But on the other side, intellectual greed demands we defend our terminology at all costs, which, as you can see, only leads to conflict and friction. The choice here isn't just about logic, it's about our motivations too. All right, Section 4, the power of admission. So if that's the problem, what's the solution? Well, it's all about flipping the script and starting to see ignorance not as a weakness to hide, but as a real strength. And the source gives this solution a pretty formal name, the epistemology of admission. Now, this isn't just about, being humble. It's an entire framework for how we approach knowledge, and it's built on one core idea. We absolutely must start by being honest about our limits. This next quote, honestly, this is the heart of the entire idea, so I just want to let it sink in for a second. The admission of an inability to produce some proper definitions is not an intellectual failure, but the prerequisite for epistemic validity. In other words, admitting you can't define something perfectly isn't failure. It's the only way to start building something real and lasting. You have to clear away the rubble before you can build a solid foundation. So let's get into Section 5, a less adversarial future. This all sounds great in theory, right? But what does it actually look like in the real world? This isn't just some philosophical exercise. Let's explore how this idea could actually reform our institutions and, change everything. Just imagine the impact for a second. In science, it could mean being way more honest about the unknown, which would build public trust and focus research on genuine exploration. In religion, it could open the door to real dialogue instead of just dogmatic conflict. And for society as a whole, it could potentially remove one of the main reasons we fight with each other in the first place. When you boil it all down, it comes to this simple, powerful truth. The source is making a direct link between intellectual honesty and social harmony. When we value understanding more than we value winning, the whole incentive for conflict just kind of melts away. And that's the thought I really want to leave you with today. Just imagine if our debates, our scientific research, our everyday conversations, what if they didn't start with us pretending to have all the answers, but instead with an honest, open admission of our limits? What new discoveries could we make then? What conflicts could we finally resolve? Really, what kind of world could we build?